All right, man. Well, we've had a grand journey already thus far. We've discussed how to be a better man in the community, out in the tribe at large, then how to be a better man at home for our families. Now we need to round this out by talking about how to be a better man in the office. And the office, this is an environment that has radically changed for a man. And I mean radically. Let's just start off by saying it bluntly. Everything that you know about being a leader in the office, everything you know is wrong. Now follow me here. The reason why what you know is wrong is you learned what you know from your father and his father. And those men grew up in very different times that called for them to be men in very different ways, a way that is very different from how the world is calling you to be a man today. They were the products of World War I and the baby boomers of World War II. Then they birthed the children who came up through the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Cold War. I'm sure you heard a consistent theme there, right? Yeah, war, and not a voluntary one like those our country participates in today. These were wars men were drafted into. Your daddies and granddaddies grew up during the birth and might of the military-industrial complex, where leadership was top-down, command and control type hierarchy. Patriarchal dominance ran supreme. That is an era your daddy and granddaddy were imprinted by and how they learned leadership. And that is the leadership they came to demonstrate at home and in the office. And that is where you witnessed and learned how to be a leader as well. Whether you know it or not, 90+% of all your knowledge and behavior is learned through observational learning, by witness, by mimicking. How did you learn how to talk? Not by reading about it in books, because you could talk before you could read. You learned it by mimicking those around you. And if those around you had spoken Arabic or Chinese or New Jersey, that's how you'd be talking today. That's how a child learns most everything. How to use a fork, how to use an iPhone, how to lead. They learn the behavior, opinions, perspectives, and character, not in books. They watch and they mimic what they see, demonstrated by those deemed to be the leaders of their tribe. Then they unconsciously go out into the world and mimic that learned behavior the rest of their lives, in the community, in the home, and yep, in the office. This is the danger you suffer. The one I'm trying to give you a cure to. If you swallow it, you are bringing the 20th century leadership that you learned and are now mimicking into the 21st century. A world, a marketplace, a society, a work culture that has radically changed and is mostly repelled by the behavior of 20th century leadership. Put as my Texas friends like to say, that dog don't hunt no more. In other words, to everyone outside of Texas, that doesn't work any longer. In fact, it can cost you in so many ways, and more than just your ability to have influence and maintain leadership. So man, beware. Now you might be asking, okay, but what has changed? And how do I have to be different to change as a leader and to be a better man? Wow. Well, that's a great question. You wise grasshopper. Here are the tectonic plate shifts that have shaken the landscape, formed into an almost otherworldly reality from the one only a few decades ago. Certainly, the greatest driving force of all this ever-accelerating change has been brought on by technology. A big part of what technology has done is disrupted every sacred point of command and control across the entire patriarchal ecosystem. Obliterated it, gone. It's open access to everything all the time to anyone freely. Anarchy rules. But another factor is your daddy and granddaddy came back from World War II and procreated like mad dogs, giving birth to a population explosion all over the world. And through the exponential growth of the habits of the rabbits, it makes this so-called millennial generation and their younger brethren a massively influential force in the workforce and in the consumer marketplace simply by their sheer vast numbers. And these younger generations are, well, different. Have you noticed? They are the same standard order human beings, of course, but they are different because they grew up during different era. An era where they only knew peace, prosperity, technology conveniences, and under-doting, often called helicopter parents who were hypersensitive about protecting their children's feelings and self-esteem. All which is fine and dandy, but that makes it so that baby boomers and millennials couldn't be more different from each other. Just think how different they are in terms of how they were raised, their acculturation, and the experiences that they were shaped and imprinted by. This, of course, affects their character, their personal perspective, what they want from life, how they are motivated, and how to best drive and hold them accountable as their leader. That is an incredible challenge, the great leadership challenge of the 21st century. We have, for the first time in human history, 5 generations working in the workforce simultaneously. Soon, the majority of all leadership positions worldwide will be held by a millennial. Meanwhile, their grandparents will still be working, and their own kids will now have entered the workforce. This 5-generation dynamic has never existed before. Holy heck, right? Oh, but that's not all. Add this to your equation. Men, women in the workforce are booming. How booming, you ask? As in taking over. At the end of the Second World War, only 10% of women with children held jobs outside the home. By 1985, that number was 50%. Today, it's over 70%. And 75% of those are full-time jobs. Today, mothers are the breadwinner or sole earners for 40% of households with children under 18. Did you hear that? Let me say it again. 40%. By comparison, that was only as high as 11% just a few decades ago. Oh, and get this. Tell this to your daddy or granddaddy if you want to see how radically times are a-changin'. Of the households who have a stay-at-home parent, 1 in 5 of those households, it is the dad who is at home, with mom out slaying dragons in the marketplace. To give you contrast, the year that I was born, 6 men in the entire United States of America were identified as stay-at-home father. 20% of the households today have that same stay-at-home father. And personally, I think that this is tremendous. I believe as Tom Brokaw does. Tom, by the way, is the guy who wrote the book, The Greatest Generation, about baby boomers and the 20th century. He said, and I will echo, the 21st century is the century for women. Here's why. They have the advantage, plain and simple. Due to technology, we are now a much more social society. We are more communal, relational, where social consciousness and transparency are the new dominant values. All of this plays into the natural, inherent, and inbred strengths and attributes of women. In general, women are better relationship builders, better connectors, better community builders. Do you deny that? Women also tend to be natural social networkers. They take a sincere interest in other people's lives, and they continually refer and recommend products and services that they're excited about, giving them an innate and authentic sales advantage. And hey, let's admit, it's difficult to outsell an impassioned woman who believes strongly in something. You ever see Oprah sell something? Dang, I almost bought a hair straightening flat iron one time just because she was so pumped up about it. And the economic reality is this. Women are, and have always been, the chief decider and controller of consumer spending in the household. And now that technology has transferred the control from the manufacturer, primarily the doughy white dudes occupying the corner office in the ivory towers, down to the consumer, meaning women, well, that makes them the new puppeteers of the marketplace. Today, women control 80% of U.S. spending. 80%! And 65% globally, totaling $20 trillion of economic control. Statistically, women make the final decision for 91% of home purchases, 65% of new cars, 80% of healthcare choices, 66% of computers, and well, most everything else. I mean, let's be real. even when they didn't decide to buy something. As soon as we drag it home, if they veto it, our sorry butts are boxing it up and carting it back down to Postal Annex to ship back. Or wait, maybe that's just at my house. So because of all of this, women as recruiters for new team members, team builders, culture creators, marketers, sales leaders, and executives have a significant advantage in relating with, empowering, and influencing the values of the new mass market. Because the one who is controlling the modern marketplace is the one staring back at her in the mirror every morning. Now, as a man, you're probably thinking, well, hell, man, what do I do? I'll tell you what you do, man. You have to man up. You have to become a better man, a modern man. Oh, and you better go get yourself some badass women to surround yourself with, to advise you, to lead your companies. Don't do this and you are committing suicide. But you decide. But now, as a man, your duties are still needed. You are still there to provide protection, provisions, and leadership. But leadership for the 21st century. So for the first thing you need to do is you have to smarten up. And not the kind of smart that you've been working on most of your life, going to school, reading books, and studying. Nah, that's intellectual intelligence. And that will not help you become a modern man in the 21st century. It will be the growth and development of your emotional intelligence. Emotional? What you say, Willis? Yeah, listen up here. To motivate and lead 5 generations in the workforce simultaneously, to work with, collaborate with, and draw the best out of the badass women you need, it will require a radical growth in your emotional intelligence. Now, in this short time that we're here together, I can't give you all that you need to learn about emotional intelligence and all you'll need to become a 21st century leader. But I will tell you where to go if you're interested. For all the tools and training you'll need to increase your emotional intelligence, I would refer you to my Ludicrous Leadership Program. It's a complete 6-module training program designed specifically to give you the training you need to become a 21st century leader. And if you are the leader of a business enterprise forecasted to do at least $1 million or more in revenue, and you know that you need to recruit and lead A-player talent made up of these 5 generations and badass women, and you want to learn the process of where to find them, how to recruit them, how to vet them, how to onboard them, and then how to continually motivate and drive their high performance, then I refer you to my High Performance Forum, which is a business masterclass for leaders. But let me touch on a couple of the core attributes that seem to trip men up the most right off the starting blocks. This will begin your journey towards becoming a better man, a modern man, and a leader in the 21st century. So get ready to take some notes. You got your pen and paper in hand? Okay. There are 2 traits that seem to be incompatible with each other, but particularly in this modern era, will need to be inextricably tied. The first and foremost, what people have always needed from their leaders is one thing. Do you know what that one thing is? Guess. I'll wait for it. It's confidence. The great Art Williams put it bluntly. People are looking for people who know what they're talking about to tell them what to do. So true. Confidence is intoxicating, mesmerizing, and to the frustrated, overwhelmed, and bewildered human being, captivating. We want leaders with confidence so badly that often people will follow it almost blindly, if not irrationally. And history proves that to us over and over again. Confidence was the single influential power figures like Hitler, Stalin, Lenin, Ayatollah Khomeini, Fidel Castro, Jim Jones, David Koresh had over people. And it's the same influential power figures like Jesus, George Washington, Winston Churchill, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, and even our current president has over people. This shows you how, above all, even for bad or good, rational or not, what people want from their leaders more than anything is confidence. However, and this is a big lesson for you here, it's coming, don't miss this distinction. The greatest leaders of history are those who combined confidence with another attribute, an attribute that will be absolute requirement as a combination as we move further into the modern era, and that is humility. To exemplify this, let's look at some of the greatest leaders the world has known. Figures like Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, Mahatma Gandhi, Eleanor Roosevelt. I think we could safely say that guy from Nazareth again. Warren Buffett, Oprah Winfrey, and arguably one of the greatest leaders we've known in this country, Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln did the impossible as a leader. And I'm not just talking about reuniting a country that is ravaged by civil war. He combined these two seemingly incompatible traits of leadership, confidence and humility, during an intensely difficult time where most leaders would just resort to forcing their will through brute strength. First, let's understand humility. Humility is generally defined as the quality or state of not thinking you're better than other people. But perhaps C.S. Lewis described it best when he said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but rather thinking about yourself less. Humility is the trait of a leader who can acknowledge their faults and listen to the advisors around him or her in order to avoid making the mistakes that could jeopardize the objective of that which he or she is leading. Then we have confidence. Confidence is having a strong sense of self, a belief that you are competent, can do something well, and that you will succeed. Confidence is our ability to stand tall, to accomplish what we set out to do. For a leader, it gives him or her the ability to carve out the path that they see as the right one, even when others might doubt them. You can see how the two traits could easily be at odds, right? Listening to other people's advice and allowing them to convince you against your own decision making, yet not listening to them when you know that you are right. So, it is balancing these two traits that will be indicative of whether you can be a great leader or not. And a great leader is what you want to be, right? I got to imagine that's what you want, or you wouldn't be with me now. So here's how Lincoln's leadership embodied and demonstrated these two traits. I'll give it to you so that you can use it to serve as a reference when you're faced with a similar challenge. During the crisis over Fort Sumter, that essentially began the Civil War, Secretary of State William Henry Seward pushed Lincoln to withdraw from the fort, to surrender, to give it up. When Lincoln refused and instead opted for his own plan, Seward then threatened him with political death and then pushed Lincoln to withdraw his leadership and cede control of the entire administration to him. Of course, Lincoln refused, telling him, "If this must be done, I must do it." His confidence held him steady in the face of those who would push him out because they felt he was wrong. Then, later, Lincoln demonstrated humility by later accepting and heeding the advice from the same man when he cautioned him to wait on the Emancipation Proclamation for a time when it wouldn't undermine the government and have it look weak. In this scenario, Lincoln shows his ability to defer to the judgment of others out of humility in order to focus on the needs of the country, not his own predetermined plans. While Lincoln had many traits associated with genuinely great leadership, it was his ability to combine confidence, steadfast, earnest confidence, with humility that are two of the most important in making the achievements that he led possible. Those two traits are also what I wish for you: confidence and humility. And now, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, I got it, but how? All right, let's talk about how. Not just how to demonstrate humility, but actually how to be humble. Because look, I get it. It's easy to say and much, much more difficult to practice. So I feel you here. Let's dig in a little bit on this. Let me give you what I think are three of the most important ways to demonstrate humility and to actually be humble. Ready? Here we go. Number one, vulnerability. Oh, I can hear you. You're thinking, come on, Darren, really? Yes, really. Here is one for your notes. Jot this down. It's a good one, so here it comes. One of the greatest strengths you can demonstrate as a man is having the courage to be vulnerable. Oh, I hope that you got that. That one right there will change you forever if you have the courage. Being vulnerable is admitting your mistakes first, As the great leader and arguably the most influential force of the early Christian movement, Paul the Apostle, he would say, when trying to save others from their sins, that he was the chief sinner, the worst of them all, he'd confess first. And that is how we all should lead, by admitting our own faults, shortcomings first. You want to express that you know who they are because you are one of them also. This is the ultimate empathy, and it establishes the ultimate connection point from which you can now positively influence. Are you hearing me here? It is saying, I know how you feel. I know what it's like. I know what you're going through. I have felt, I have dealt, I have struggled as you are. And now that you're connected, now you are in a position to influence, empower, encourage, and now redirect them by then saying, and then I realized, and then I discovered, and here's what I did to move past this, etc. There is massive influential power when you're willing to begin with vulnerability. It is the ultimate strength of a leader. Remember that. Number 2, the second most important trait of having humility is to listen. Not just stop talking long enough to let the other person speak, but to really listen. Come on, admit it. You do this all the time. Your face is pointed at someone, your head is nodding, you're giving all the indications that you're listening, but you're not hearing them at all. I know, because I have done that myself. Probably still do, but I'm getting better every day. So I'm not going to give you a bunch of tricks to try to appear that you're listening, like using open body language, nodding, saying, I see, tell me more, and smiling a lot. I'm just going to suggest that you really freaking listen. That's it. It's no more complicated than that. Just slow the heck down and listen. Really hear what's being said. Oh, and listen so intently that you can also hear what's not being said. You see, usually only a woman has that superpower, but you have it too if you would just stop talking, stop thinking about your response, and stop trying to work up the potential solution in your head while they're still speaking. And just listen. Did you hear that? Just listen. I know this seems simple, but for some reason, especially for us thick-noggin men, this is crazy hard for us. But it doesn't have to be. Just stop and listen. And then lastly, 3, ask questions. Leadership is not about having answers. I know that's what you thought it was. I certainly did, but it is not. Leadership is about identifying problems, then drawing from the available genius all around you to arrive at the best solutions. For some reason, and again, particularly men, many people in the position of leadership get this wrong. Here's why I think it is. For much of our early childhood, by nature, we are highly inquisitive beings. Asking questions about anything and everything is the norm. We seek and desire to learn, and we're generally interested in the world that surrounds us. Do you remember that time way back when? If you don't, you were certainly reminded of it when you had young kids. Then we go to school, and for the most part, education generally gears us towards coming up with answers to questions that are given to us by others. Our success is based on providing the right answers to questions posed on tests. We're never tested on coming up with great questions. Weird, right? Then we enter the workforce, and now we are dictated the answers by the boss or by the board or whomever has the powers within the office. We are told what to do and who to satisfy so that we can climb the corporate totem pole. All our natural inquisitive nature has been rooted right out of us. Then finally, we get to be the boss ourselves. Now our entire adult life has informed us that being in a position of authority, management, or leadership means having all the answers and that you are on Mount High. To prove yourself worthy of your holy authority, you become the guru dispensing answers all the time. You inadvertently create an environment where everyone else takes a daily, if not hourly, pilgrimage to your perch in the sky, waiting in line at your door, begging for the "got a minute" so that you can bestow your great wisdom upon them so that they can move forward on their project. This is where businesses stall and organizations implode. When an organization becomes dependent upon the answers and blessings of the boss. Here's the critical distinction between 20th century boss and the 21st century leader. Bosses give answers. leaders ask questions. Bosses manage work. Leaders lead people. Bosses develop subordinates. Leaders develop leaders. Bosses dictate plans. Leaders cast the vision. Bosses insist on control. Leaders inspire collaborations. Bosses like to be the go-to person for the answers. They like giving direction and opinion. It makes them feel valued, important, and reinforces their position of authority. But then it requires team members to regularly seek out the boss for the solution rather than being problem solvers themselves. All this stifles team member growth and ultimately limits the organization's performance and productivity. I hope that you can see that. So how do you change all of this, you ask? Well, good question. You're getting the hang of this by not providing answers. Instead, answer every question with a question. Teach people to think, to learn and grow, and think for themselves. Columbo, for those of us old enough to know of the amusing and disheveled detective, solved all his great unsolvable mysteries not by having answers, but by asking questions. Many, many questions, as should you in solving your own organization's mysteries and problems. Look, I am chief sinner here, the worst of them all. In leading many of my organizations, I've made this fatal mistake of being the guy with all the answers. And all of this, all it did is create further dependency, mutated my people's ability to think for themselves, hampered the speed and pace of our productivity, and crippled our growth trajectory, particularly in this fast-moving, hyperflexing, and progressing marketplace that we're in today. So I beg of you, implore you to change this behavior as well. For otherwise, it might land you in leadership hell. Here's how to repent for the sins of the past, to get back on the path of the good and righteous. Here's what I did. 20 Our Fathers, 10 Hail Marys. No, just kidding. No, I strictly forbade myself from providing any answers, as you should. I'll tell you how I did it. You're going to want to jot this down. With every question or inquiry, I simply respond with, well, what do you think? Or, what do you suggest? Followed by the pivotal question, and why? I don't want to just evolve their answers. I want to evolve their thinking. The situations will change. The needed answers will change. So you don't want to just educate people on the answers. You want to evolve and grow their thinking. And the why follow along helps them do just that. Those questions are magic. I hope you got them. Think back to your favorite teacher, someone who really made a difference in your life. Got someone in mind? Did he or she give you all the answers? Nope, probably not. Did he or she make you look for the answers? Probably yes. Did this teacher hold you accountable for acting on your answer? Yes, absolutely. These are the ways great leaders help people learn, grow, and cultivate the potential of all those around them. They ask questions, lots of them, continually. And then be sure you incorporate our point number 2 after you ask the questions. Listen. Really freaking listen. The last tip I want to leave you with before we wrap all of this up and send you out there as a better man to protect, provide, and lead is this. To be the man, the one everyone around you wants and is counting on, relying on, and desperately needs in the community, at home, and at the office, you must be the center of calm. No matter what comes down, you have to be the eye of the storm, the bedrock, the stable foundation, the safe and solid core. If you become rattled, if you show fear, when your confidence is visibly shaken, all 3 of your pillars come crashing down. This is what encompasses what everyone around you is counting on you for. It is the purpose of your existence, what you are here to provide. Protection, provisions, and leadership. And if you are freaking out, panicked, shaken, unnerved, and distressed, it all comes crumbling down around you. It is one of the things that I admired most about my father. Yes, my father was like Sergeant Gunnery Hartman from the Full Metal Jacket. Loud, explosive, reactionary, forceful, overly alpha. But when it really mattered, when a crisis occurred, he was always the calmest and most level-headed one in the situation. When everybody else was freaking out, afraid, fretful, and their emotions were running wild, he was solid and stable under pressure. He was never as calm than when there was a crisis. And because he was, you knew you were safe, that everything was going to be okay. By simply watching my dad, the look on his face, and how he handled himself, you felt assured and secure. As Coach K of Duke University said, as the leader, you need to show the face your team needs to see. This is no matter how you might be feeling on the inside. Yes, I learned how to be a man when I saw my dad stand up and step into a fight when the duty of his protection called for it. Yes, I most certainly learned how to provide, watching him growing up, even if it was scrambling from commission check to commission check. He always found a way to do what had to be done to meet the needs of his household. But one of the most important lessons that I learned from him on how to be a man is when I watched him in a crisis, when those under his care needed him and were relying on his strength the most. He was always the calm center. Gentle men. That is what your world around you needs from you too. So to end, I say we all need to man up and become the men we were meant to be.